Good evening, YouTubers. We're going to do something I have not found a video on YouTube or anyplace else on the internet. This is replacing the bushings. We in the United States call them bushings, but they are actually branded as a bearing. This is a carbon bearing out of a March May pump. It's what we'd refer to as a mag pump, meaning it's magnetically driven. I don't have the whole pump here. We'll do another video on how to disassemble the pump, how to adjust it, and make sure everything's within specifications. Tonight we're just going to focus on replacing the bushings. After I replace an impeller, I bring the impeller back to my shop and we replace the bearings, so we always have one ready to go. This is, like I say, a March May pump. Also may go under a name of Rotos pumps. So let's get started. We have the impeller in hand. You need to be very careful of this. Pretty much everything will stick to this thing. It's an extremely strong magnet. So first thing we need to do is loosen the set screw that holds this two-piece unit together. You can take the set screw out completely or just loosen it up a little ways. Fortunately, these come apart quite easy sometimes. I do have actually one in our scrap iron pile that didn't come apart so well, and you want to make sure that doesn't happen too often because these are about $2,500, so they're definitely worth putting new bearings in. So the first thing we need to do is remove the old bearing. The old bearing is made out of carbon, so it's very brittle. What I like to do is I just run a score down each side, split it in two the best we can, and then dig it out, trying not to mar the stainless steel. We have to do it on both sides. So bear with me while I'm pounding, and we'll see if we can get this out relatively effortlessly. We're about halfway there on the first bearing. Someday I'll probably devise a tool to do this a little easier, but for now this procedure seems to work. Alright, so we got the first side out. And as I might guess, there's a little nick in there. We'll need to file the nicks out to make sure that there's no damage. There's no damage. Let's see if we can get this to zoom in. You can see a little scoring inside. Are you able to get that on camera?
Yes, a little.
I'll rotate it to see. There's another one right there. And that's from the chisel. And like I say, I'd like to come up with a tool at some point to prevent that from happening. Because what will happen with that new carbon bearing, if we have a burr like that, we go try to press the new bearing in, the new bearing will just disintegrate. And each one of these carbon bearings runs about $80 a piece, so the last thing, of course, you want to do is damage one. So let's knock out this side, and then we'll grab a Dremel tool and clean this up. Well, this side's not going quite as smoothly as the other one. Close. Okay, we have everything out of there. Let's see if we can. I don't need the pieces. So you can look in there and there's a light little mar there from the chisel. I don't know if that's from this time or the last time the bearings were replaced, but one way or another we'll run a file over it lightly to make sure there are no burrs. Like I say, the bearings are quite expensive, so we don't want to risk breaking one, and it is a couple week wait for another bearing, so I do everything we can not to damage it. Unfortunately, I do have a spare, I believe I do, but again, we don't want to damage them. So, let me grab a Dremel tool here, and we'll file that down and make it nice and smooth, and then we'll press in the new bearing. I apologize, I wasn't prepared for doing any filing on this, so I did not have my Dremel tool ready to go, but as we all know, with a Dremel tool you can be ready to go in a matter of seconds. All right. All right. I did that slowly and lightly with a little bit of finesse so we weren't removing too much metal, but we took the burr off, and that was the big thing, and it's the burr that would cause that bearing to break. So let's try our luck on pressing a new one in. Little helpful hint here, do not attempt to do this with a hydraulic press unless you have a precision hydraulic press. Do use an arbor press. This arbor press is a very simple machine. It's nothing more than a gear running down and applying pressure at an increased ratio so you can press in with some leverage, I guess I would call it. And the advantage you have over an arbor press, and I adjust mine each time I use it, and just make sure that this is tight in there, because if it's loose and it wobbles, it'll break the bearing just that fast. And like I say, these bearings are as brittle as glass. And first ones I installed I broke, and I was very embarrassed because of the costs that they were and had to order another set. So my recommendation is be very careful. So when I say carbon, I mean this is basically like pencil lead. So that tells you how brittle they are. First thing you need to do, oil. We're going to do the back one first. We're going to put a squirt of oil there, and we're going to want to completely coat the inside. Make sure there's no dryness whatsoever, because if that bearing hits a dry spot, it will stop, and when you give it another push, it will crack it as it grips on the friction of it. So I like to make sure that this is well coated. Now, let's see how this one slips into this press. Yeah, we should be fine. Basically just setting the bearing in. And it somewhat self-centers. I don't know if I can turn this so it can be visible. Alright, so we got our bearing in there. I'm going to make sure everything is centered as close as we can get it. We're going to come down with our arbor press and cross your fingers. Obviously the grand goal here is press that bearing in without breaking it. And we're moving. So we're going to have to put our plate in there to support this properly on this end. There we go. Should be hitting square. If not, align it to where you want it and start pressing. And then it does make a creaking, cracking as you're going. Doesn't always mean it's breaking though. So once you feel that you've bottomed out, you are there. Now, this particular bearing, and as in many magnetic drive pumps, the bearing looks like it's not pressed in all the way, but that's actually your rear thrust. So you don't want to try to press it until that is flush. Now this side, another story. That one, I believe, we'll see, but I think that one pushes in all the way. I'm giving it a good squirt of oil in there. And I think we're going to want to take this plate out to get the proper depth. And again, pull out your overgrown hunk of pencil lead here. Coat it down good with oil. Make sure it's not starting on a dry spot. Get it lined up. And cross your fingers it doesn't crack. Just like clockwork. And that one is in. No breakage, no marring. Went in there just perfect the way we want it. So at that point, you take your impeller, thread it back onto the magnet. Just give it a little jam for a lock. Hand tighten it. Take your wrench here. And you now have replacement carbon bearings in your magnetic drive impeller. Now if you're doing Teflon bearings, because that's the other option is Teflon, you're definitely not going to run into breakage issues or be too overly worried about how they install, because they do install much easier. But if you're running in a pump in certain chemical conditions that other bearings won't stand up, that's when you're going to use the carbons. So there you have it. Thank you for watching us, and please subscribe to Fix It Troy. Good night.